Hi guys, in this video I'm going to tell you why all the career advice you receive in high school is wrong and give you some real, honest advice that can benefit anyone. In this video I will explore three main overarching concepts. Firstly, the historic context of traditional Western schools. Secondly, being employed by someone. And lastly, taking your own path, aka self-employment. But first, some housekeeping. If you watch any of my previous videos, you will notice some branding change. I hope you like it, and I am the honest teacher now. Before we jump into the advice, we need to understand the problem. Where does our current traditional Western school model come from? Given the vast leaps of industrious progress and diversification given to us by the Industrial Revolution, there was a growing need for factory workers to have a bit more knowledge other than that pertaining to agriculture and other ancient vocations. About 200 years ago, factory workers now needed general technical knowledge. Knowledge governed by the needs of the industry and approved by various governments, which will allow them to walk into any factory with some semblance of usefulness and proficiency. Factories did not have time to educate their employees, for that would hinder the fast pace of production and therefore of making money. So this is interesting, right? The educational approach that involved one subject generalist teaching about 30 students at a time was a result of industrial needs, not of some deeper societal need to improve our knowledge in such a way that will empower individuals to change and improve society of their own volition. If you think that is interesting, wait until you hear the real kicker. Besides, for some educational content and some classroom managerial strategies very bloody slowly being updated, most of us are still being educated in the exact same way. Like, seriously. The problem with this approach in the 21st century is that we no longer live in a world of censored and limited knowledge. And unlike 200 years ago, the future is becoming increasingly volatile and difficult to predict, given the immense rate of change we have been able to develop in our society. Seeing as knowledge today is in ridiculous abundance, we no longer have a need or, quite frankly, any use of predetermined knowledge to be regurgitated over and over and over again. But rather, we need an educational approach that allows for knowledge to be managed and tailored to the needs of the individual. We even changed the definition of the word education. The original meaning of the word education was to bring forth. We could interpret that as to bring forth the best potential of the individual. But we've kind of wrecked that one. There are many who advocate for schools to change their approach from technical knowledge acquisition to general skills acquisition, such as critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration, which sounds ideal because these are the skills that we need to make sense of the ridiculous abundance of information and knowledge that we have, quite literally, at our fingertips. But this is not feasible at the moment for a number of reasons. A. These skills cannot be taught using content-driven curricula. A content-driven curriculum prescribes the knowledge deemed appropriate by those who invented it, which means that, once again, knowledge is censored. And censored knowledge cannot cultivate critical thinking or creativity for everyone, as the ability to think independently and creatively cannot merely be driven by content alone. B. It is not profitable, nor is it affordable, to change schooling to a more humane model. It's not impossible, but there are very few governments and privately owned independent schools that can afford to break away from the 30 students to one teacher norm. And this is a seriously big issue. Who would want to commit financial suicide by appointing more teachers without tripling school fees? What's the point in investing in humanity? Unfortunately, schools are run like businesses because it involves money. And C, most adults are not ready for any major educational changes. They are also the products of this system, and very few of them understand what is necessary to break this factory worker mold and mentality. Given these three issues, how can you even imagine trusting the career advice you receive in high school when the advice is so clearly tailored to making sure that the vast majority of us end up as employees, disempowered and financially dependent on an employer who is accruing wealth off the sweat from our brows? So why would you want to break this mold? If you look at current global trends, it almost looks like the average adult is depressed, overweight, anxious, and addicted to all kinds of bad habits, and generally not satisfied with their job and therefore their life, seeing as you spend about a third of your adult life working. Why? Because they were also taught to just go through the motions, follow the recipe, work for someone else for about a third of their adult lives, so they can retire and enjoy old age, if they can make it there and make enough money to enjoy it. So what is the problem with this? While our extensive bureaucracies have undoubtedly yielded very, very positive results, like immense technological advancement and radically declining the numbers of those living in abject poverty and states of hunger, there are still two main issues that we are struggling with in the 21st century. One, you are still largely dictated how to think and what to do in an attempt to get the prescribed job done. Much like school. I wonder why. And two, you have no control over your own time. And you really need to think about that. You are born onto this earth with nothing but time. And you really need to value what you are willing to trade for your time, or even sacrifice for your time. In any other context, we would refer to this phenomenon as authoritarianism, maybe even slavery. But we think it is okay because we are remunerated for our time, which is fine, but a strong argument can be made that you cannot be free unless you have the freedom to say both yes and no. So where does this leave us? You have one of two choices. Follow the recipe, be employed by someone else, or take your own path. But I cannot stress this enough. Neither is necessarily wrong or right, but both definitely does not suit everyone. So let's have a quick look at what these two paths look like. Option 1. Following the recipe. You need to understand and make peace with the fact that by being an employee, you are selling your time and freedom, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Just make sure that your goals and your values reasonably align with your chosen occupation and preferably your employer as well, as far as possible. This obviously means you need to spend as much time as you can identifying and fine-tuning your values, strengths, and skills in order to empower yourself to make the best occupational decision for yourself. A process that school has no time to help you with directly. So the responsibility falls squarely on your shoulders, which is definitely not a bad thing if you actively choose to bear that responsibility to the best of your ability. Now, the reason why you need to be so sure is because you need to understand that your time will always be at the mercy of another's command during and sometimes even after your working hours, which means that you really need to find value in the time spent working. On top of that, you need to understand that if this and your chosen occupational field does not fulfill you, there will most likely be dire consequences to your general well-being. In order to do well in a position of employment, you need to work hard to make sure that your goals are clear and that you know what you need to do to attain them. They should also be of significant enough value for you to make the necessary sacrifices of your own command over time and its endless intricacies worth it. But don't worry, those who choose to walk their own path have very much the same challenges, albeit in a much different guise. Which brings us to our second option, taking our own path. This is something you should especially consider if you are creative in action, expression, entrepreneurship, or thought. Although creatives generally make up the minority of any population, which might be part of the problem, not quite sure. Seeing as current traditional school models cannot realistically directly aid in the development of true individual creativity and thought, you need to be very clear on what you would like to produce from your life. And obviously this can change over time. If you wish to leverage your creativity while also attaining general life fulfillment, you are going to need to carve your own path through the fray. A journey requiring a set of skills very few secondary schools impart. Which means that if you would like to lead a life of creation and freedom without first subjecting yourself to the bureaucratic world of work, which is arguably any creative's worst nightmare, then you need to start working on it now. Which means that you need to assume the responsibility to do what is necessary. As an independent creative, you need to learn not only to hone your creative skills, but also how to monetize your skills and creations in a vastly interconnected digital world. You cannot bank on becoming an overnight success, and therefore you need to become a 21st century entrepreneur. But be careful. You need to be socially cautious and very strong. By not submitting to the allures of mediocrity, you will face being unpopular. Remember, the average person and their perceptions are molded by this system you are trying to change or be liberated from altogether. Which means that you need to be prepared to face adversity and be labeled a deviant, because hopefully you are one, and hopefully that's good for you. In conclusion, no matter which path you choose, you need to most likely start with the assumption that your school is failing to empower your decision-making processes in relation to your career or occupation. So, assume the responsibility to do something about it. Your time is so precious, so stop wasting it on unproductive meanderings like pointless video gaming or aimlessly scrolling through social media feeds. That's not going to bring you anything. These are all distractions, trying to gain your attention, which, if successful, means that your attention is not on your own success and well-being. Take on more responsibility for yourself than you think possible at this very moment, and you will most likely wake up tomorrow a happier, more success-driven individual. In my next few videos, I will discuss how you can empower your creativity, as well as how you can empower yourself within a set system, such as a school or a formal workplace. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and if there's anything you would like an honest teacher's opinion on, hit me with a comment. The worst I can do is give you an honest opinion.